Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. Well, the Mojave Triangle UFO story continues to evolve. UFO investigators Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp on their podcast Weaponized, they today slapped back at debunkers who said that the object observed at a military training base in California in 2021 was only flares. Corbell and Knapp, however, they're not prepared to say that the object seen at Camp Wilson in Twentynine Palms on April 20th, 2021 by 50 to 80 Marines was definitively a giant UFO, but they also indicated that further investigation could determine that the lights were flares. So they're keeping their options open here. But so far, to me, as far as I'm concerned, based on some of the things that Corbell presented today, on their Weaponized podcast, he had testimony from 3 Marines. Now, the names weren't given of these Marines, but at the same time, what they all said that they saw an object, and the object was not flares. They all were insistent that the object was not flares. So based on that testimony that he revealed, the 3 Marines who witnessed the object 2 years ago, it seems unlikely that flares were responsible for the mass sighting. In fact, I think the testimony seemingly smashes into a million pieces the proclamations issued last week by video game programmer and who turned UFO debunker Mick West from the comfort of his armchair, his gaming armchair, that the lights pictured in the images were flares. So that whole flare business to me is I think you can toss that away based on the testimony. You had Corbell and Knapp. They played this interview that Corbell did with these 3 different guys, these 3 different Marines that were witnesses to it. And based on their testimony, they're insistent that what they saw was not flares, and they know what flares look like. And we'll get into. I'm gonna play some quick little edits that I made of each of those conversations, and also I highly recommend that you check out the Weaponized podcast. I'll leave the link, of course, in the description so you could check it out for yourself. But now, before I even get into that, I just want to say that, of course, as everyone knows who listens to my podcast, I was critical last week when Corbell came out with this because he didn't provide all the information that I thought he should have, because then what it did was it gave an opening to the debunkers. John Greenwald from the Black Vault, for instance, came out and said, "Hey, these things. There's a picture that I found on the military site that was already out there that looks like that were flares. That looks like the same kind of formation as the lights in the images that Corbell provided." I also thought that the pictures really didn't give us much because it was lights in a dark sky. You really can't tell what it is. And the other thing was you had witnesses who were anonymous providing testimony to Corbell. But now, even though they're still anonymous, at least you're hearing their voices. That's something more. And again, it's not like Corbell and Knapp are out there saying definitively that this is a giant UFO. They're out there saying that it could possibly be flares, that there needs to be more investigation needed. So they're turning this. They flipped the script basically. So the debunkers came out with all their stuff last week. Of course, John Greenwald was highly critical and saying that they should have came out with more information and blah, blah, blah. And then you had Mick West going on Twitter and making a big deal about this, saying that they're most likely flares. He made all these declarations from the comfort of his gaming armchair, as we all know, as he always does. But so now that I think that Knapp and Corbell now have they flipped the script here, as far as I'm concerned, based on today's podcast that they had. And again, there were 3 different interviews, and I'm going to play segments from each one, and we'll talk about them. So here was the first guy. Again, there's no names that Corbell provided for these people, but these were actual people who were there. Like, again, keep in mind, people like Mick West, he was not there. Okay, so forget about that. So here we go.
You were there that night?
Yes.
And you saw it?
Yes. I saw it appear and disappear.
How were you first alerted to the fact it was outside? Like, how did you first see it?
When we were there, we would have, at night, we'd have, story time or something just to pass the time, and it just appeared. And then when we saw it, and then everyone started freaking out. No one knew what it was.
And how long would you suspect that it was there? What's the longest length that it was there?
30 to 35 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, it was there for a hot minute.
A lot of people are saying that these are flares.
No, they weren't. Definitely 100% not flares. I think it was a craft. It was weird.
So this was unlike anything you've seen before or since.
Oh, yeah. First time seeing something like that. Yeah, it definitely looked like a craft.
Was there any sound?
No sound at all. It was kind of eerie.
And if you had to just guesstimate, can you give me an estimate size?
The mountain was pretty big. It was pretty much like the same length as the top of the mountain. So I'm saying like at least 75 yards. Like almost a little more than half a full field, I would say.
Yeah, I keep hearing that. And you still don't know what it was?
No, but I can speculate that it was definitely a UFO.
It wasn't some military object or craft?
No. If it was, the lights would have been blinking and it would have been moving. And it was not doing any of that. The night was pretty crazy.
Why?
There was convoys of vehicles, helicopters. It's nothing you'd really see happen there.
So that was unusual. The response was unusual?
Oh, yeah. There was like a convoy that night of vehicles heading that way. It had to be at least like 50 to 70 trucks. It was a huge convoy. And then all night long, there's helicopters just flying around everywhere. It was very unusual.
Even though that was part of you're there for training missions and there's a known training mission going on there at that time, this is still unusual?
Oh, yeah, it was definitely very unusual. I think they were probably going to hunt it down or something to see if they could find it. It definitely wasn't flares.
So there you go with the first guy saying that it's definitely wasn't flares, and actually there was activity going on at the place that was very unusual, where there was a lot of helicopters flying around. It seemed like it got everything all riled up. The appearance of this object riled up the powers that be that are in charge there, and they were checking things out. But that was only one of the witnesses. So here's a snippet from one of the other interviews, the second interview that Corbell presented on the podcast Weaponized with George Knapp.
Can you tell me for how long you saw it in the sky?
I was outside for at least 10, 15 minutes. I know that I wasn't outside like the whole time.
Did you see when they shot flares up and they had those lumen flares?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's one of the pictures I sent you. There's flares in the sky with the lights behind it.
One of the kids, he goes, you could see a shape, he said, about it not just being lights, but seeing the shape of a body of a craft. Did you see that?
Yeah. They were stagnant. They weren't moving. They were very in place. That's what was so weird to us, is that it was just kind of just like there.
Did they drop like flares? Did they descend like flares, or did it stay and hover in place?
No, not at all. That's not what these lights were doing. The lights were pretty stagnant in the sky and not moving anywhere.
Size, if you had to guess.
It was a big object. Whatever it was, it had some mass to it. It wasn't just, some freaking small unmanned thing flying in the sky. I mean, with the distance and stuff, it could have been as big as a freaking football field, honestly.
So there's a second witness now saying it's almost as big as a football field. Now, there's more information coming out now. It's going to be harder. It's getting harder now for the debunkers to try to say that it's only flares when, again, because Mick West has never had any of these places. He within 5 minutes of these stories coming out, he makes these proclamations and, it's just flares. And then it turns out it's just not the case. He made a fool out of himself. So basically what you're seeing now from Corbell and Knapp is basically they're basically body slamming the debunkers. The debunkers they're starting to look like the fools. Last week the debunkers were making Corbell and Knapp look foolish, but now they're able to come back with more information. And I guess the investigation is going to continue, and maybe there'll be more video that comes out. Maybe because apparently if there's 50 to 80 people there and they're filming this object with their cell phones, maybe there'll be some video that comes out that's more definitive definitive, where you could actually see more clearly that it is an object, and it definitely, most certainly rules out flares. But we'll see. But these guys, again, they were there. They saw it. They saw an object. That they're saying that they saw an object. And here we're going to play an edit from the last guy that Corbell presented, the last Marine witness.
We all ran outside seeing what it was. At first, of course, we all thought it was flares, but flares don't stay up in the air that long. They were in like a triangular shape, and they were just holding that pattern for a long time. You could kind of see an outline of something, but we weren't sure what it was. It just looked like something I've never seen. It was very odd.
Why?
Well, when a flare gets shot up, I mean, it leaves a trail, and it's also being parachuted, so it doesn't sit in the same spot for a very long period of time, and the light dims down. That light was there for a very long time. I remember we were all out there probably for about a good 30 minutes looking at it, which, like I said, which makes no sense to me if it would be a flare, because a flare is continuously falling. You'll see that smoke. There's a parachute attached to them, so they slow down while they fall. And you couldn't see a parachute on them, even if they were zoomed in. They weren't moving. It wasn't even burning, like a burning kind of light.
Okay, there you have it. So we have, I mean, today, what this does right now, the great part about this presentation from Corbell today on his podcast, Weaponized, is the fact that, you know, him and Knapp said that they're still not prepared to say what it is. They're saying that there's a possibility it could be flares. That was a smart move, right? That's a great move by them to say that, because now, let's forget it. It's not flares. You have witnesses now. This is just 3 of the witnesses making the statement. Apparently, and all these guys, you know, they're all talking amongst each other that night. So there's certainly going to be other witnesses that are going to step forward. Now this is really good, credible kind of information that we're getting. And it also goes to prove just how ridiculous and how stupid anybody is who listens to someone like Mick West. That's what this whole podcast today from George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell, as far as I'm concerned, not only helps to substantiate better this incident, the Mojave Triangle incident, but it also helps to prove how ridiculous and insincere and people like Mick West really are, because to come out and just make these statements all the time like he does not do any. And remember this. Always keep this in mind. The debunkers never really do any kind of real research. Right, this guy just makes proclamations. He's sitting behind it again. He's sitting on his old gamer chair, most likely, apparently, just, you know, watching what goes on in the UFO community online, and then he just makes proclamations, and he has this big giant following that are like bowing down to him and throwing him accolades for what? What does he do? He does nothing. He's created this fictional world where all this stuff is easily explained, but he didn't do any research. So it turned out I can tell you right now, I was wrong for jumping the gun too. I was upset because I don't like to see the debunkers get footholds, and that's what happened last week when this story first came out. Because then you had John Greenwald, you know, he had to put in his 2 cents to make make himself look important in this issue still, right? They're being insincere, and you know, there was stuff already on the military site. You know, so so it was a mistake by Corbell. That's why in a way, I agreed with Greenwald, because it was a mistake not to put everything out there. But now that they're starting, this makes Mick West like the fool that he is, like the insincere person that he is. I mean, there's no research behind whatever he puts out there, really. He didn't go out trying to talk to these Marines. He didn't send out flyers, put on the internet, hey, if anybody was there, could you please contact me? I want to contact you. No, he just looks at the images and just comes up with proclamations that it was just flares. You look at this picture, it looks like they moved a little bit. Well, hey, maybe it's an object that was moving just a slight little bit. And the other thing is that you had witnesses saying 30 to 35 minutes now that this thing was just hanging out there. Not just 10 minutes like originally reported. Now there's more information coming out saying, no, it was 30 to 35 minutes. Flares aren't going to hang up in the sky that long. But again, I'll give credit to Corbell and Knapp for pointing out that, hey, maybe it will turn out to be flares yet. We still need more investigation. But I'm going to say this right now. I don't think it is flares. And I think that the debunkers are look like fools right now. Anyway, I have more to say about this. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Okay, we are back. We're talking about this incident that was recently reported and became a big hoopla around it. The Mojave Triangle incident, and there's still something. Is it one of the greatest UFO cases out there in the world? No, but what this is showing to me is that the debunkers they're in this for the money. They're in this for the fame. That's all they have nothing to really offer. The people like Mick West out there, don't listen to this guy. He's just making a fool out of you, and he's sitting back laughing in his gaming chair while he does so. That's what's going on here. But anyway, I see John Greenwald from the Black Vault got very upset on Twitter today with regard to something that George Knapp said during this podcast when they were talking about this update on this Mojave Triangle situation on their podcast Weaponized today. And apparently, I listened to the whole podcast, and during the one part of the podcast, George Knapp made this statement. He said, "We know that there's another guy who will go running to mom at the Pentagon and get her to issue a statement that debunks the whole thing." And we know what he's talking about there. He's talking about John Greenwald, because John Greenwald, when he put an article out last week about this, which I talked about in my podcast that I did on this last week. And there was a statement that he received from the Pentagon from Susan Goff. I don't know how to pronounce it. I hear it pronounced by different ways by different people. But really, what does it matter? We just call her Pentagon mouthpiece. How about that? Pentagon mouthpiece responded to John Greenwald. I didn't think it was worth even commenting on, because as far as I'm concerned, you can't trust any. When it comes to the UFO topic, again, I try to keep pointing this out. Whenever the Pentagon says something to you about UFOs, don't believe it. It's always a lie. What's the point? But John Greenwald was upset about this comment that George Knapp said. And here's what John said on Twitter. He says, "When a mainstream media journalist chastises getting an official line to tell the full story, it shows their true intent." I don't know. What do you mean? I don't understand that. What do you mean showing? What's showing his true intent? What are you talking about? I don't know what he means by that. What's the true intent? He was just making a joke. It was just trying to be funny. I mean, not everybody's like sitting around like where like all uptight all the time. I mean, it's just we're just human beings making. I don't see where he gets out of that. I don't think that. Put it this way, I don't think that anybody really has a problem. I don't think people like Corbell or Knapp. In fact, I don't have a problem with John Greenwald. I think he gets a little bit uptight. I think he's getting uptight. He can't take a little joke. He can't take a little humor directed his way. He takes it the wrong way. And then he writes here, "In the past, George Knapp praised my reporting, confirming their videos with the use of a Pentagon statement when they were unable to even get a response from them." Yeah, of course he's going to. Why wouldn't he? I mean, I praise your work all the time, John. A lot of people out there. I mean, I know there's some people in the UFO community that don't like you at all. But I always say, hey, you're the biggest bulldog we have out there filing those Freedom of Information Act requests all the time. I mean, it didn't get us anywhere yet. I mean, they keep giving us redacted, classified, redacted documents that don't tell us anything. But I mean, you're trying. Right, so I give you all the credit in the world for that. Continuing here, it says, "Jeremy Corbell sources the Pentagon too with statements I received when it serves his interest. Yet he stood by and giggled at the silly comment about attempting to get a DoD position statement." Again, you can't. This is just a little joke. It's not. So what? It is like that. I mean, you're running to mom to get a Pentagon statement, and you threw the statement in there. I didn't even read it last week. Right? No, I didn't even read. What's the point in reading it? Because it's not going to be true. There's nothing. Again, you can't trust anything the Pentagon ever tells you when it comes to the UFO topic. They're going to lie to you. They've been doing this for a long time. And then finally he says, "It seems to me that they love the Pentagon when it helps them, stoops to immature cheap shots, and brings in their own giggle factor when it doesn't." I think you're just taking this way too out of. You're just taking this wrong. I just think I don't think there should be a little bit of humor in life. People make fun of me all the time. You should see some of the stuff that gets put out there. I don't care. Who cares? Just let it roll off your back. There's people who hate my guts too. They say stuff that I get messages sometimes, hate messages. I don't care. I mention them sometimes, but I don't. Who cares? What are you going to do? Anyway, I commented back to John. I said, with regards to this, because I just didn't think it was something worth getting worried over. I mean, in my comment to him, I said it's pretty clear after 76 years of lying and obfuscation that the Pentagon cannot be trusted to ever tell the truth about UFOs. Never trust the government when it comes to UFOs, ever. Their public comments are as worthless as used toilet paper. That's the truth. They're as worthless as used toilet paper because you never get anything out of them. It's a bunch of nonsense. And then he commented back, and he said that, so ignore the Pentagon? The video evidence that's been online for 2 years is all you need in this case. No, it's not all you need in this case. Again, you're forgetting about the witnesses that were there. You weren't there, John. Neither was Mick West. You have people on Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp's podcast today who were there, who's saying it was a solid object. Hey, I agree. Those pictures, right? Those images, they're not that great. But here, you do have something. It is something. And now you have witnesses, at least using going online, talking physically with their voices and telling us, no, this was an object, a solid object, right? And there was a lot of weird activity going on when this thing showed up. There was planes flying all over the place, helicopters flying around. It was unusual, according to the witnesses. So there's more to it than just what was getting put out there last week by people like Mick West. And I even wrote to him, I said, no problem in quoting them, but a proviso should always be added with examples of how they have lied and obfuscated. There are tons of them. There are tons of examples. If you're going to use if I was to be writing an article on the Pentagon, providing a statement on UFOs, right? If I was to be doing that at this point in time, I would actually have their statement on, and then I would actually there would be a paragraph on there, because you need to be objective with this. You can't, by just putting out whatever they say and just walking away like the mainstream media does, right? That's what you would be doing by putting that comment in there. By doing that, you're just letting them off the hook. You got to point out that they've been lying for a long time. I mean, you could just go back to Roswell, for instance. Look at the Roswell incident. Look at all the witnesses that stepped forward. The Air Force never had any witnesses, and yet they claimed, it was only a balloon, a mogul balloon, and anthropomorphic dummies that people saw out there. There was over 100 witnesses that said otherwise. First and second-hand witnesses that said otherwise, right, to the Roswell incident. The only witness that they had was some guy that the Air Force had was some guy named Charles B. Moore, who came out and said that it could have been a mogul balloon that was misidentified. By the way, by people at the only atomic air base in the whole world at the time. Now, there was numerous witnesses that testified, deathbed confessions, signed affidavits, television interviews, numerous people that talked about this, people that were from the military, people that were relatives to the military, people that were relatives of the law enforcement near that place at the time, talked about receiving threats from the government. And then what does the government do when they're finally pressured into trying to release information? The General Accounting Office back in the early 90s tried to do an investigation on this, tried to get all the records for Roswell. And what do they get back? They say, all the records from 1946 to 1949 in Roswell have been destroyed. So basically the government's lying. They've been lying for a long time. They don't have any witnesses on their side as far as with the Roswell incident, except for this one guy, Charles B. Moore, who, by the way, was lying. And I'm not going to get into that right now. That's another story. But yeah, again, and that's just the beginning of it. That's just the tip of the iceberg. They've been lying for all these decades. How can you trust anything the Pentagon says when it comes to UFOs? You can't. They're lying to you. They've been lying to you. They'll continue to lie to you. And you should know, John, because, I mean, look at all of these documents you've gotten over the years. Where did it get you? Nowhere. What's it showing us? Nothing. Does it prove anything? No. It just proves that every now and then some Navy and Air Force pilots go flying around looking for, chasing after UFOs or encountering UFOs. That's about it. But they don't tell you anything else, and most of it's all blacked out. They've been covering this up, and they've been lying, and they've been obfuscating for all this time. You can't trust the Pentagon when it comes to UFOs. Never, ever, 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 never, ever trust the Pentagon when it comes to UFOs. Anyway, until next time.